But I think part of all that was to showcase that all the work that was done here was just as important. It didn't matter what job you had, everybody had to work together in order to make something like this come into being. And so, we have those other paintings. 2 of them are still here in the museum on long-term loan to us. And you'll see the difference. You'll see the brightness of these, and sort of the colors pop. The other ones, the other mystery associated with them, besides the fact that we don't know who painted them, is the fact that they were sort of lost for quite a few decades. They were in a building in Trenton, and the city of Trenton bought that building. It used to be a Roebling building, and when they found the paintings, everybody was surprised because no one knew where they had been. So those paintings were really important. It kind of, again, showcased the magnificence of the Rowlings and what they considered to be the things that set them apart. And as you walk through the museum, you'll see lots of things like that. You'll see machinery. It still exists, that the Roeblings actually designed and built. The Roebling Company and their workforce designed and built. This is a 80-ton wire rope machine. These photos are taken by a photographer who's well known. And he, in essence, went around the country taking photographs of some of the most important historical records and engineering record items around the world, so around the country. So it's nice to be able to see what this piece of machinery looks like from the very top of it to the center, all the way down into the well in the bottom, where most people would never be able to see it. And to know that they designed that and they built it, which meant that they didn't just build it and sort of go get the parts from someplace else. They would use patterns, these wooden patterns. They'd actually make those. So there was a carpentry shop and a foundry on site here. They would take these kinds of wooden patterns, lay them in black sand, fill it with whatever kind of molten metal they wanted, and come up with a piece like this, or like this, right? Or a tool, or something else that would help them to, continue to do the work that they did. And they did that, again, until they shut down in 1974. Questions so far?
No, that's cool.
Okay. Great painting up there by a man named Don Jones. It gives you a sense of what it was like to, work here, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those high stacks you see were going. The coal furnaces constantly burning, making that steel and making wire, and the large flywheel that you see out there in the mill yard was a part of that, sort of storing and creating the energy that was needed in order to make steel, and not just the steel, to make the wire from these gigantic blocks of molten metal. And so that is a painting called The End of a Shift, because what they're walking toward is right behind us, in fact. It's the village of Rowland. This is the original worker village, where...
Made a home.
Yeah,
right.
Those are the original homes. They're all still standing. The original bank building, the original general store, those buildings are all still there. And while they're privately owned, or they're owned individually now by families, they were originally owned. The entire village of Roebling and the steel mill here and everything that was owned by the Roeblings and the Roebling Company. And so it's fairly amazing that an industrial age village and remnants of their work are still all standing here. This is a national historic district, and so that's part of why all this can be saved, and we can share it and have a museum.
Well, there's a lot of historic stuff right around Camden, throughout the whole area here.
There are.
Camden and Princeton.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Camden, Princeton both have lots of historical, and there's a lot of history and historic sites, one-off sites throughout the state of New Jersey. Really, New Jersey is very rich for the history of the country.
Right, yeah.
Even connections to the Revolutionary War, which is neat because they're planning already for the 250th, what do they call it, the semi-quincentennial. Whew, it's a long word. The 250th anniversary of the United States, right? So the New Jersey has a lot of history here all throughout it, and all of this, a big industrial company owned by an important New Jersey family, well-known, who made an impact on the rest of the world, and the place that they built, plus still connections with and to the people who worked here. So we still have 50% or so of the people who live or own homes in the village of Roebling are connected to those people that you saw in the film, whose families lived here, worked here, and they're still helping to sort of being a part of preserving that history. So this building was important and safe in part because it was a center point between work and home. The main gate, as they called it, was literally at one point just this little tiny sort of passageway. So people would know there was a difference between walking on the street and being at home and going and entering work.
Being in the,
like, you know,
industrial complex or
exactly.
whatever, right?
Some kind of gate to, a passageway to say you entered work, right? Then they expanded the building several times, and part of doing that was so that they could have something unique in here. On that end of the building were things like, you know, you've got to have your office space, you've got to have your administrative or secretarial, you've got to have human resources. The big safe was down there, the main master clock was, here. All the clocks around the rest of the steel mill were set according to that clock. But on the other end of the building, as they expanded it, was so that all the civic functions of, managing the town. This was a privately owned town, but they still had a jailhouse that was here in this building. They still had an ambulance house here in this building. The very first infirmary before they built a hospital in town was in this building. So this became a really important space to save. It was also, because this is a U.S. Superfund site, so remember they've cleaned this space up and had to do some remediation where they took, tons and tons of tops of soil from here, took it away, brought in cleaner soil, and then monitored that over the course of many years to make sure it was safe to reuse. And then they rebuilt this building using the original blueprints and specs. So bringing this place back to a place where it was usable and useful to the community here. And then the community got to decide what they wanted to do with the place. And that was a part of them deciding this should be a museum where they could keep the history of their families and the company and the Roeblings alive. You're more welcome. Let's go this way. The actual main gate, you can see the pathway where people walk that. The same pathway that was in that painting is right here, that green building. So the last remaining buildings were all the things, and you'll see pictures and maps that show you what else was here. That's actually an original fire hose reel that they used to have them all throughout the village, and they would have little spaces where they would house them. This is one of the original ones. But you see all that space that was out there. There are maps and pictures that will show you what was here. The last buildings that remain are this one, that small green building there, which was called the Time Office Building. There's a small guard shack down there at the end of the path, and then near the river, there's two buildings called 92 and 93, and that's where the big giant rope pre-stretcher or stressor was. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we go over here. So what you'll notice is that you've got a timeline, right? And then that timeline is a really good place for you to start on your sort of tour. You can see that at the top, you've got information about the Roeblings, starting in 1806, when John Roebling was born in Prussia, which became Germany, all the way through 2009, when this building was literally returned back to the community and opened as a museum. And so in the middle of all that, you've got all these interesting things that people may not know. You've got, of course, John A. Roebling immigrating to the United States, coming here, as they said in the film. You've got Washington Roebling and his wife, Emily, doing the work that they needed to do after John Roebling died suddenly, and then building the Brooklyn Bridge, which was first, of course, known as the Great East River Bridge, helping to make sure that bridge stayed a Roebling project. Emily fought to keep Washington on that project after he got the bends multiple times, 2 times, and actually almost died. But they still kept that dream alive and finished the work that John Roebling had started and built the Brooklyn Bridge, right? And so that's really sort of the crowning jewel of the Roebling family's sort of cementing their space in history. But they did other things. They provided the wire rope between the biplane wings of the Wright brothers' plane when they flew for the first time at Kitty Hawk. And they also, the Roebling Company provided the air controls and the air cord that was inside the control systems that were built into Lindbergh's plane when he flew over the Atlantic for the first time. So they had a lot of sort of moments in history. They built America's first sports car, the Mercer automobile, named after Mercer County, where Trenton is and where they built the cars. And Washington Roebling, who's the son of Charles Roebling, one of John Roebling's sons, he's the reason they got into the car business. But he also is connected to another really important moment in history. He took his car, one of his other cars, and his Mercer. A friend of his traveled overseas along with one of their butlers, and he went to Europe on a driving tour. And when he came back, well, he didn't make it back. He was on the Titanic. And so he actually perished on the Titanic, and they never found his remains. And so,
No, they found too many compared to what went down, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but there are people who remembered him. And there was an exhibit a few years ago where someone who was a little girl and was on the Titanic was one of the people that he helped to save. He actually went through the lower cabins, knocking on doors and taking women and children and putting them on lifeboats. And she remembered seeing him as a little girl and having him put her on one of the lifeboats and saying to her, "We'll see you again soon." But of course, they never did. And so the history that's connected in...
Leonardo DiCaprio did the same thing.
Well, maybe he was playing this guy. I don't think so. But this is an interesting thing, so that you can see the pieces of history that connect to the Roeblings, but you also see other things happening in the rest of the world. Again, even that while they, as the Roebling Company, and well, as the Roeblings and the Cruiser families were building their first sports cars, Henry Ford was starting to create his first Model Ts. Of course, his business took off in a different way, and because he came up with a way to mass produce them, right? He came up with the assembly line. So, but at the same time, all these different people were out there, inventors, were creating combustion engine cars, and they were a part of that time frame too. They were really in the thick of that as well. So there's lots of pieces along this that are interesting in that timeline, but then it also connects to what you see behind you, and these two panels give you a sense of why this is called a model company town and what the company itself was doing and sort of why they ended up here. Just gives you more information from what you saw and heard in the film. There were over 760.
I guess they call it model company town because it's like one of the first one guys that did like the towns.
Yeah, there were about 2,500 company towns during the industrial period of the United States, but some of them weren't really nice.
Like the one for the government, Hoover Dam. Yeah, like one of the worst ones.
Yeah, they could be really, really terrible
The
places.
people owed the government more than they were getting paid.
Right.
With the stores and everything.
And the same thing in terms of, some of the companies, some of these industrial sort of captains of industry during that time didn't treat those workers really well, didn't build great towns for them to live in. So this was considered a model town because they did such a phenomenal job of building it and designing it and really trying to give people a very, sort of good and solid start in. And for many of the folks that were coming here, they were immigrating to the United States for the first time. So their families were starting their American journey right here by working for the Roebling Company, either living here or living in Trenton and working for the Roeblings. The next gallery is going to give you a sense of, what the family was like. So we'll go over here, and then you'll be able to walk on your own. I'll come and check in with you in a minute. But in here, you've got more information about the Roebling family and the father, John Roebling, a painting of his wife. And then Washington, the eldest brother, Ferdinand, who was actually not an engineer, but was the money guy. Every good family business needs the money guy. And then Charles Rowland, who was also an engineer, but Charles is the one who built this village. It was his idea to create the steel mill. It was his idea to begin making their own steel, and it was his designs in terms of building the village here and designing the steel mill. So he really led that project. His brothers let him, let the little brother go for it in that. So you'll see more information on the family. You'll see more about John Roebling's engineering. I always tell kids when they come through here, especially when they're from schools, this is all pre-computers. There were no computers. They weren't, putting in numbers and then letting it do the work. They did the work themselves over and over again, drafting tables, large sheets of paper. You'll see some of those drawings that they would have done in order to build some of the greatest structures known to man. All of them still standing. And so the engineering of John Roebling is featured here, and then there's a wonderful exhibit about the Brooklyn Bridge, which, again, so many people know the Roeblings because of the Brooklyn Bridge. So I would take a look in here, and then as you go to the next gallery, you're going to be in the company gallery that tells you more about the company and why it was so unique and different, and why they chose, again, to plant themselves in Trenton and in here. And then you'll see some of the products that they built, that they made, but also some of the unusual, or some of the places where they built their bridges. And then the next gallery is about the community, followed by a gallery about the Mercer automobile, and then the last one is about the Golden Gate Bridge.